Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Just be a few more minutes. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning. I'm Sunnyvale Mayor Larry Klein. Welcome to the 31st installment of my weekly virtual office hours. Uh, Please continue to reach out and basically give me compliments as far as that they appreciate these weekly live stream addresses. Hearing from their mayor, and so because of that, I'll continue to do these while we shelter in place and however long that takes. This Facebook Live event is a great weekly chance for me to give you updates, and a lot of people really appreciate the updates of what's happening in our city, answer some of your questions, and of course, give you some words of encouragement. So, thank you for allowing me to represent you and work for you during extraordinary times. And so, I hope that everyone's doing well, staying safe and healthy. Uh, Definitely the weather is changing. It's gotten hot again, although we'll see how things go over the next few weeks. Please remember to take care of yourself. It's critical. It's like uh, there is definitely mental fatigue, just staying at home for so long. It's difficult times for many, whether or not you can get out and walk around, whether or not you feel safe. Going out and having a meal, and we'll be talking about meals indoors are now allowed a little bit later, but people miss that social interaction, and so I'm hoping that you're doing okay, and anything that I can do, please feel free to reach out. That's part of my job, is as the chief of our public safety says, the part of the mayor's job is being counselor in chief, and hopefully, I've been able to provide some positive influence in the community, delivering masks, delivering toilet paper and food, but just trying to bring our community together during very difficult times. Remember to keep following the county health order. You know, People need to do whatever you can to stop the spread of the virus. Continue to wash your hands, don't touch your face, reduce the number of people that you're coming in contact with. Uh, do perform safe social distancing when you're out and about, whether or not you're at the grocery or at the restaurant. And of course, always wear your mask. It's critical. It's mandatory. It really does make a difference. And so, as I've said before, if you need a face covering, um, feel free to reach out. I'm still finding people that, at the farmers market, that conceivably only have one, or still using disposable face coverings. And there's definitely a place for a disposable face mask, but for the majority of people out there, and for what you're doing on a daily basis, having a reusable mask, or more importantly two, is really critical. So if you need one, feel free to reach out. We're not out of the woods yet. you know you could be a carrier of the virus, or you meet somebody that could be a carrier and be asymptomatic, not showing any symptoms. And so it's really important to protect yourself and protect the other people that you're dealing with. So we're now 214 days after the March 16th health order started the whole shelter in place in an attempt to slow the spread of the virus. And since that declaration, a lot has happened. A lot happens every day. I have daily press conferences and seminars to watch, conference calls to confer and advocate on your behalf and our city's behalf. And it's difficult times for many. Things are starting to open back up, but it is with that threat that we could have another surge of cases, and we might need to slow things and shut things back down. So it's difficult times, but make sure that you do your part. Let's go ahead and start talking about what's happened at the federal, the state, the county, and the city level over the last week or so. On Monday of this week, and so let's mainly focus on this week. Lots happened this week. Governor Newsom had his kind of COVID update, and right now, from a state standpoint, we're doing about 125,000 daily test cases tests a day, which is actually pretty impressive. And the average turnaround time for those tests are 2 to 4 days. So we are seeing, and that was one of the goals that the governor set out about a month and a half ago, was to make sure that we have enough tests in within our county, within our state, to basically give a test to anyone who needs it. Because as if we see a surge of test case and we're about to enter flu season, it's important that people are able to get tested and traced if on seeing how many people that they've come in contact with. Part of Monday's press conference was to kind of say what was going to happen on Tuesday, and we're seeing kind of a continual change as far as the majority of the counties have now moved out of the purple, the most restrictive tier. 42 counties are now out of that tier. And then it was basically saying that several counties, including our own, would be coming out of the red tier later in the week. And so that was critical. And we talked about this about a week and a half ago. 2 weeks ago, we had seen that we'd had a steady decrease in the number of cases, that we'd also been meeting new requirements from a state standpoint to make sure that we were meeting, let's say, the communities in need. So, East San Jose, South County, making sure that those areas specifically had enough testing going on, enough community outreach to make sure that we're not seeing a surge in those communities. And those were new restrictions that the state put on a few weeks ago. So the total test cases within the state continues to rise, and on Monday it was approaching 850,000, and I think we've now passed that from a state standpoint. And one of the other things that the governor talked about was fire season. Over last weekend we saw cooler temperatures, and so we definitely seen between the efforts of basically cooler temperatures and the efforts of the firefighters, that the glass fire, which was one of the biggest fires currently was in the North Bay, was about 95% contained. And so that blaze has destroyed, I think, 800 homes and forced tens of thousands of people to evacuate. So it's been a very bad fire season. But the other warning was that Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, that there'd be high winds and high temperatures, which of course meant that there might be power shutoffs in order by PG&E specifically, to make sure that there weren't equipment fires of lines hitting trees and ultimately causing issues. And so we've been fairly lucky in the South Bay, or in the Bay Area. I think there were about 2,200 people who had their power turned off because of PSPS. The winds haven't been as bad as expected, although the temperatures have gotten a little high between the last few days. So luckily it's not been as bad as last year's PSPS events, but keep in mind that the weather could change and we could be back in that within days, depending upon what the weather is. So that's an important, luckily it didn't affect anyone here in Sunnyvale. It affected some Santa Cruz Mountains, kind of in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and some of the high East Bay, East San Jose area. So luckily, we haven't been hit, but hopefully we won't have those bad winds. And then the other thing was that the governor said that on Tuesday, the state health would be issuing directives about Halloween, and I'll be getting into those a little bit later. We talked last week about some of the things that the county had issued, and now they're talking about conceivably from a state standpoint issuing similar orders. The other thing, so on Tuesday they issued some of those orders, both on two things, one on households and one on Halloween. And One of the things that they did was kind of, from a state standpoint, define a larger bubble that up to 3 households can gather, as long as they're wearing masks and following other safety precautions. And this was kind of an effort to start preparing for what's going to happen with Halloween coming up in the holidays, and the concept of they still discouraged gatherings outside of a single household, but understand that during certain times of the year, Halloween kind of being the kickoff, but mainly Thanksgiving and the December holidays, people normally congregate together. They break their bubbles, or expand their bubbles, and so the state is trying to say, okay, up to 3 different households can meet together, as long as they're trying to be safe. And I think that's really important as far as starting to prepare for that. From a Halloween standpoint, the state health officials uh, requested people do a virtual or distanced Halloween. And so, doing online costume or pumpkin carving contests, you know, having Halloween displays by car, so decorating your house, and then doing kind of a tour in your car of the neighborhoods around Sunnyvale or around the area, attend a drive-in scary movie, and then if you're just at home, creating a haunted house or candy hunt for the people within the household, scary movie night, decorating your home or yard for the neighbors as well as yourself, and then just design face masks to match some of your uh, some of the costume, whatever you have. So you'll see some photos that I'll be putting up later today about my Willy Wonka costume with its matching face mask. So you'll see some of that. But it's important that we do whatever we can to stop the spread of the virus. We still want to celebrate, and it's just finding safe ways to celebrate during these times. So, and then and that Tuesday, of course, they said that Santa Clara County was moving into the orange tier. So initially, everyone was in the purple tier, most restrictive. About 3 weeks ago, we moved from orange and from purple into red, and then on Tuesday, they declared that we moved into the orange tier. And last week, Santa Clara County health officials basically announced that they were preparing for what that orange tier meant, and it was opening up certain other items that people have been asking for. It was opening up indoor restaurants, indoor gatherings for religious ceremonies, and a few other things as far as pubs and movie theaters and all that. So, as expected, on Tuesday, that from a state standpoint, we moved into the orange tier. So on Wednesday, it officially became valid to have indoor restaurants, indoor dining at restaurants for up to 25% capacity, up to 100 people. Other things that changed with the county health order was uh, outdoor gatherings can now be up to 200 people, all with safe social distancing and mask wearing. Indoor religious gatherings can be up to 100 people, or up to 25% capacity, whichever is lower. And then it also covered, um, bars can have outdoor seating. They still can't have indoor seating, but they can open if they have outdoor areas for their basically clientele. Movie theaters can open indoors to 25% capacity seating, and there's all kinds of measures as far as cleaning down the theaters. And I said last week that when we were talking about that health order, that the AMC theater was ready to open, and engage, and they were ready to open today, as a matter of fact. The problem is, of course, the county health order, as things currently say, for like a movie theater, even though they're doing 25% seating and 25 and space, and wearing your mask and all that, they aren't allowing them to sell food. And so that has become let's say, a big issue with AMC opening, because in most of the theaters, we'll see, I haven't heard of any indoor theaters opening yet, mainly because concessions is a big part of the movie-going experience. A lot of the blockbusters for this year have been pushed off into next year, so there aren't any kind of tentpole movies out there that are really attracting people. So it's difficult, to say the least. And so I've been talking to county health on when they will be allowing um, indoor, basically movie theaters to actually sell popcorn and snacks while you're there also. So we'll see how things go. But right now, AMC has decided to postpone that opening a little bit longer. And it's engaging in any indoor activity, such as dining, going to movies, religious services. They're all still pose a higher risk of spreading COVID-19 than like outdoor dining or outdoor activities. So and inconceivably, continue to be safe whatever you do. If there's a new spike of infections, we could easily move back into the red or maybe even the purple tier, depending upon what the numbers are from a county standpoint. So be safe. Do what you can to prevent the spread of the virus. And then on Tuesday evening, City Council met, and we had a very long meeting. It went past 1:30 a.m. So it started at 5 and went to 1:30. And we don't have many of those meetings, but they happen every 6 months or so. And we started the evening off with a study session to talk about public safety policies and practices. And so we got some of the feedback from from our residents, and we've had 5 basically unity listening events up to this point, and it was kind of giving a summary of what had been changed, and ultimately what the department has already done, and what they're currently evaluating. So from a department standpoint, we've released a lot of data where we're actively looking at our policies and to say what else can we do. But we've released shooting data from the last 10 years. We've released the number of complaints over the last 5 years, and basically talked about how we've actually changed our policies within the last few years, from our body worn cameras to our drone program to other things to make our policies and procedures from a city standpoint, from a public safety standpoint, very open to our residents. So it was good to hear from the chief and get his take on kind of what the process is, and this is an ongoing commitment, in his ongoing commitment to continue to engage our community and figure out what steps we will take going forward. One of the other things we did was we approved the issuance of bonds of up to $160 million for the Civic Center. And this was basically kind of one of the things as far as funding, looking at long-term funding. And from a positive standpoint, we've got our series of bids for the new Civic Center and the addition onto public safety. And that bid came in $51 million less than what we had expected. And so that's positive. And this is one of the things about doing construction and when there's a downturn. And definitely we've seen construction start to slow. And so, during the last downturn, during the last recession in 07, 08, we actually did a number of did more capital projects. And this is the whole thing: is there's capital projects and there's kind of operating projects. Operating budget is our city staff and making sure that the services that we're providing on a yearly basis are being done. But capital projects are planned over a period of time. So it's redoing the sewer system, it's redoing the wastewater treatment plant, it's fixing sidewalks or things of that nature, which there's a certain amount of long-term investment that's done. So from a civic center project, we had been uh, council 5 or 6 years ago, long before the majority of the people that are on council now were there, kicked off the effort of a new civic center. And there was a whole series of outreach within the community looking at what could be done. And ultimately the design, is kind of went through. Final decisions were made last year and the year before as far as direction. And so what this bond is, and this is the thing, is what getting the 160 million in bonds actually gives us more flexibility from a city standpoint, because bond rates are very, very low right now. Actually, the return that we're getting on our investments are higher than the 2.25% bond rates that we're currently looking at. So what the council did was authorize the city manager to go up to 160 million. We'll see if he goes all that way, but there's other capital projects that we need to do, and getting, we'll say, cheap money at any given time. And one of the things, as we went through going through the bond approval process, we've actually got our great rates from great rating from a city standpoint. We're a very well-run city. A few years ago, we dropped a little bit from our rating, mainly because, and the majority of cities in California did, because of potential issues with retirement, and the retirement benefits that need to be paid out. What we've done in the meantime, in the last few years, is put in, let's say, funds to make sure that we're saving enough money to make sure that we can, depending upon what CalPERS returns are, we can actually make up that, and setting aside money to deal with retirement benefits for our employees. So that was a critical sort of thing, and we got an AA plus rating. That was a positive thing from a city standpoint, that our rating went back up because of efforts made by council, made by city staff, to be fiscally conscious in try to set things in place to make sure that our city is looking at a 10-year balanced budget as per charter, and the 20-year plan. I think that has made a big difference. So we'll see, from a funding standpoint, how things play out as far as the new civic center. But from a certain standpoint, it's and I've had some people ask about the existing civic center. The building was built around 50 or 60 years ago. And has had lots of issues in the last few years. From electrical, we have I did a tour several years ago, and we had employees doubled up in cubicles. It's definitely, and right now it's cold. Sometimes it's very cold in the winter, or very hot, because the regulations within from room to room. So the new civic center, and we've talked about this before, will be LEED Platinum. It'll be energy conscious. It'll basically set us in place for the next 50 years, which I think is really an important step from a city standpoint. And the other thing we received on Tuesday night was the housing study report. So this was kicked off about 3 years ago under a previous city manager, and it's taken a while because we lost our city manager, we lost our director of housing, and finally this came back to council. And this was looking at, kind of from a holistic standpoint, how we make sure, for one thing, we get additional housing, but how do we deal with seniors aging in place? What do we do to make sure that they're well protected? How do we deal with getting more affordable housing? How do we encourage things like ADU? So there was a laundry list of things that council was evaluating, that had come back from the community, that had been, some of it had been directed by council when the project was first kicked off, but some of it had been heard from the community and heard from council over the last 2 years. One of the things was rent stabilization for mobile home communities. And so I was part of the losing side that was hoping that we might have a rent stabilization ordinance in place. There was kind of two options. One was a memorandum of understanding with the with the landlords from the different mobile home communities and the residents, saying that this is how much the rent increases would be increased on a yearly basis. This is what the vacancy increases would be when somebody moves out or sells their home. And so, that's been there for, this is part of the discussions that are going on. I thought, when we talked about this 4 years ago, and when I talked to the mobile home community members, I was saying that, if you know what you want, move forward with a ballot measure. That hadn't been done, and so when it finally came back to council, it was, well, do we want to, and conceivably what could be done with an MOU could be, agreed upon with the threat of an actual ordinance. So maybe became more flexible, and even some things that we might not be able to do in an ordinance, with forcing rollbacks of certain rents and things of that nature, without lots of legal issues. But from an ordinance standpoint, the majority council ended up saying that we'll try an MOU first, with the threat of, the sort of Damocles, that if the MOU, if process is not made with an MOU, then conceivably council will quickly go and implement an ordinance. So we'll see how this plays out over the next 6 months. But I was hoping that we would be able to do more for our community, and that wasn't the case. But we'll see. We'll see how quickly this process goes. And then, other things that were discussed were, basically sharing, house share, and Catholic Charities has already been doing that within the South Bay here. And so that was one thing that if you know of a senior that's looking to share a room in their house or share a portion of their house and is looking for, a good organization, Catholic Charities has been doing that for years. Other things we looked at and talked about was increasing the inclusionary ordinance for sale homes. So when there's multifamily units built, a set of condos right now, 12.5% of those have to be below market rate, and are basically, there's a lease restriction, and there's a process that people apply, that they can basically purchase that home for a less than market rate value. Right now that's 12.5%, and it's been 12.5% for about 14 years now. And so I pushed for a higher percentage when on Planning Commission. It's finally back to council, and hopefully we can quickly go to 15%, and then maybe even higher. We'll see where that goes. And then other things from a supply side standpoint, making sure that we protect our apartment dwellers also. So requiring a right to lease. So basically, not requiring that a apartment dweller needs to have a 6 month or year option on their lease. They can go month to month if they want, but at least having that option, that the landlord needs to provide that option to a renter. And I think that's pretty important, that if we're talking about rental, I've heard in the past, and this was shocking in my mind, that there were landlords that were raising rent 2 or 3 times a year, and during the boom times, and that to me is very difficult for working families. That it's like there's kind of an expectation that you might have a rent increase once a year, and whatever that percentage is, it depends upon kind of what the history is. But to have rents go up multiple times in a single year, that doesn't really make sense. And so moving forward with a right to lease ordinance basically says that anyone who's renting will always have the option for a 6 month or a 12-month lease. Whether or not they take that is a whole other thing, but it always needs to be an option. And then other things we talked about were rental or were assistance programs for relocation, and then conceivably even RV parking program. But a lot of those measures were pushed off till later. Some of the quick ones that we can implement we'll go ahead and start implementing right away. And so that'll come back to council in December, kind of laying out what next steps are now that we've kind of tiered what those options and what those measures need to be. And let's see. And then we were going to go through the first quarter budget update. It's after we approved this year's budget, and with the threat of COVID-19, we talked about, okay, on a quarterly basis, we'll do a deep dive every quarter, and we were supposed to have our first quarter update. That being said, after 1:30 a.m., council will not take up any new items. So that was beyond. We tried to take it up and saw that for one thing, it was a fairly long list of staff, a fairly long staff report, like a 20-page staff report on where we stand from a fiscal standpoint, and what kind of income we've got from a city standpoint over the last 3 months. It has been fairly positive. The year-end revenue was on a positive standpoint partially because of expenditure variance from the general fund, but we didn't want to undertake that at almost 2 a.m. in the morning. So ultimately, and it's also important for residents to actually be able to take part in that. So once you get past midnight, and I hear there are councils that go to 2, 3, 4 a.m. multiple times a year. Once you get past midnight, you don't get as much, basically resident participation, which I think is very critical, and it's also, the acuity of council to actually look at the details of what's going on in staff reports or ask appropriate questions kind of drops off too. So I think it does make sense that we actually have those cutoffs and not take up items too late at night. And it's the same sort of thing as the county supervisors have their meetings during the daytime. That's positive for some people, but then of course it's also not positive for those people that are working during the day and can't attend meetings. So you have those balance of evening meetings, making it more flexible for some, but at a certain point you don't get the resident participation that you really want. Okay, so let's go ahead and start talking about some upcoming events. Tomorrow, I'll be at the farmers market. It's election season, so I'll be at the farmers market again to answer your questions. Drop by for a yard sign, a campaign button, or pick up some literature. Yeah, I'll be there. And it's from my standpoint, if you can, get the word out for my campaign. Visit LarryForMayor.com, sign up for a yard sign. Sign up to get emails that you can then forward to your friends and family. You can walk a district also, so if you want to walk your neighborhood and pass out flyers, that's also available. So definitely, feel free to reach out and hopefully, it's like we'll see where we are in I think it's 18 days until election day. So, it's crazy time to be running election, meeting people and knocking on doors. Most people don't want to answer their door. I'll be honest, although I've been happy to talk to some people with my mask, from a safe social distance at people's doors. But it's been good, hearing your questions, especially at the farmers market. If you have questions, of course, right now, please add them to the chat window. Let's go ahead and get to, and actually, let's go. We'll get to that later. Let's go ahead and get to the county health dashboard. So from a state standpoint, we talked about that the state is now over 850,000, so it's 858,000 cases, and we've had almost 18,000, no, we've had almost 17,000 deaths now, so 16,000 and several hundred, 800, 700, 800. So we've had, quite a few deaths, and this kind of, it's sobering to make sure that, yes, we're opening up, but there is that threat, there is that, worry that people will get COVID, and flu season is starting. That's the other worry is, we normally have people that are, hit by the flu. So it's the health consequences of that twin endemic of COVID-19 and the flu. And so take care of yourself, whatever you can do. Um, be safe, wear your mask. Things are, from a county standpoint, things are looking better. The number of cases, has steadied, if not drifted downwards a little bit. We're at, from a county standpoint, we're at 22,858 cases. That's up about 700 from last week. So for the last 3 weeks, we've had about 700 cases every week. So that's pretty flat. And then from a death standpoint, from a county standpoint, we've had 367 people that have died from COVID-19, and that is increased about 13 from last week. So we're having about the same number of people die every week, and we're having a steady number of COVID-19 cases and then deaths. And this is just a reminder that you need to be safe when you're out. And if you think you've been infected, please, maintain safe social distance, get tested, find out whether or not you have been infected with COVID-19. We currently have 85 people hospitalized with COVID-19, and then from a city standpoint, San Jose still remains the biggest area, and it's half our county where they've had the most COVID-19 cases. It's now at 15,097 cases. That's up 550 from last week. So we're they're seeing a slight increase in San Jose. And then from a Sunnyvale standpoint, we've now broken 1,000. So it's 1,015 cases. That's up about 20 since last week. So we continue to go up, but we're from a Sunnyvale standpoint, we seem to be down a little bit, which is good for us, of course. Let's see. And then I continue to do advocating on your behalf. We've talked in the past that I have weekly calls with the county supervisors and county health, and we've talked about weeks ago we talked about indoor dining, and that finally came true this week. So I was able to be back at being seen in my at my corner table by the window, not doing office hours, although several people stopped by and had a few questions, all wearing their mask. But I was happy to be back in my old seat and enjoying myself. And I've talked about testing. So normally it's the second and fourth Mondays in the month, and Monday was a county holiday, Indigenous Peoples Day. So it's actually moved to today. So if you want to get tested, there are still spots open. You can go to sccfreetest.org and sign up. You can get your appointment done. You can also drop by. No guarantee that they'll have capacity, although they do have a capacity for a few people every 15 minutes or so, depending upon what their appointment schedule is. So you can get tested at Murphy Park today. I'm actually have an appointment for later this morning, so I'm going to go get tested, mainly because I've been, at the farmers market meeting people, and yes, I'm wearing my mask and maintaining that safe social distance, but it's good to be safe, as much as possible, and meeting a lot of people out there. So normally you can get your appointment sign up 7 days before. So you can sign up 7 days before the actual appointment and before the test day. So if you go to sccfreetest.org, you can sign up today. On Monday, you can sign up for Monday the 26th. So you have a little flexibility as far as that's concerned, but definitely get tested if you think you've been exposed. If you're an essential worker, if you're working at, in healthcare industry, and I've heard some positive results that some of the healthcare providers that were being, let's say, more giving people a lot of issues, even though they were covered by insurance, some of the healthcare providers were not being good about testing people if they wanted to be tested, and so it was important from that standpoint that the county put in certain health orders in place to say that if they're not being tested, they can be. If they're not testing their people that need to get tested, they can be fined, and that seems to have been a wake-up call for a few of our healthcare providers. So I'm happy to see that. People have said that they have been able to get tested, and it's an ongoing effort from my standpoint to make sure that whatever we can do to get tested, to get tracing, to open up in a safe way as possible is critical. And from that standpoint, it's important that everybody do their part. I'm happy to, if you have questions, and talking about local issues. It's like making sure that if you need to get tested, you can. If you have other issues with county health, it's flu season. They're doing free flu shots around the county, so that's also being publicized. If you go to the county website, you'll see that. It's if you can, definitely get your flu shot this year. It'll be critical, whatever you do. Okay, let's go ahead and get to this week's weekly questions. First up, I know that there are locations within this city and other cities that are not following the safe social distance protocol. What can I do? And so there's several things. So the county is actually creating a report, a report location that will be easy for you to basically say that this restaurant, this bar, this location is not doing safe social distancing, is breaking the rules. If you go to SCC COVID Concerns, CONCERNS.org, you'll see basically a place where you can, get more information. You can raise issues, and you can also call their advice line at 866-870-7725. And that will give you kind of a laundry list of things that you can do to raise those concerns. You can also call the DPS non-emergency number that they will go out, they will do a simple investigation, and they'll talk to the owner and remind them of what the county health orders are and why they're in place. So that's being set up. The county, I think, is still hasn't set that up fully, but that's close to being set up. But you can always call the non-emergency number for DPS, which is also important. Don't call 911. It's not an emergency, but it is important from that standpoint that those establishments that aren't following the county health orders, need to come in line, because the more people that get infected, the more the spreads, the more likely that we're going to have to shut back down. So, thanks for doing your part. The question that I keep getting, of course, is when is Whole Foods opening? And so, as I said last week, we were just a few weeks away. The sign actually went up yesterday. So Thursday, October 29th, is the big opening day for Whole Foods. And so definitely it'll be, it's a good move forward for downtown, to have a market right in downtown. And we have several markets here. We have Sprouts and Safeway and Trader Joe's and several smaller markets. But definitely there are those people that have been waiting for this to be right downtown for years, and it's good to see a new business opening up in downtown. Once Whole Foods opens, that was kind of another kind of anchor tenant as far as the City Line project is concerned. You'll start seeing other locations farther down McKinley, so other restaurants and other stores that'll be opening. And so you'll start seeing a lot more movement and motion downtown once the Whole Foods is open. So I know that they've been working on the interior of several other locations along McKinley, but that Whole Foods opening They're very close. We're less than 2 weeks away, and it'll be great to see that finally happen in our city. Other questions? What's happening with the playgrounds? So we talked about this last week. About a month ago, we opened our first 4 playgrounds, and that was, as a trial period. Lakewood, Brayley, so the playgrounds at 4 different parks: Lakewood, Brayley, Las Palmas, and Ortega Park were the first playgrounds to be opened up, and was to make sure that, well, the county had changed its order slightly so that it allowed, it better defined how to open up playgrounds, and so we created the appropriate signage as far as what people need to do. It's important that the kids that are using the playground sanitize before and after, sanitize their hands before and after. They need to wear masks. All those sorts of things to make sure that the parents are safe, social distancing, the kids are being as safe as possible. And in general, all the feedback that I got from those playgrounds, and that staff received, was very, very positive. So we made the decision about a week and a half ago to open up the rest of the playgrounds. Now that's done with several things. One, to double check the safety, to make sure that they're completely safe, to do some cleaning, and then of course add that appropriate signage as we open them up. So over the next week or so, you'll see more playgrounds open. There's other cities that have finally started following suit. So Mountain View just opened up some of theirs. Cupertino, Santa Clara have started to open up their playgrounds. So finally, kids that are doing remote learning actually have places to go during the daytime, not just being stuck at home. So I think that'll be important, during their recess, that they'll actually be able to now go to playgrounds and not just go to the park. So that's actually moved forward from that standpoint. And remember to wear your face mask. It's the city won't be doing, initially, and that was the initial order, was saying that the city would fully sanitize the playground equipment, multiple times a day, and that was just not a possibility. After every kid ended up using that, it wasn't really seen as a possibility. So anyway. What's happening with Sunnyvale elections is voting safe. So ballots started arriving about a week and a half ago. And just from a Sunnyvale standpoint, 3 people are running for mayor, 3 people running for District 2, 2 people, and that's downtown, 2 people running for District 4, which is southeast Sunnyvale, and then 3 people are running for District 6, which is North Sunnyvale. And so there have been a whole bunch of forums and endorsement interviews, and from one of the questions that I got is, what do you think about the county Democratic Party chose to endorse one of your opponents instead of you? This is the whole thing about the whole endorsement process. You never know who's going to show up in a given meeting. So we've gotten a lot of dual endorsements. I've gotten certain endorsements. Other opponents have gotten certain endorsements. It varies. It depends on whether or not you are out there pushing. And from the county Democratic Party, I've been a longtime Democrat. That being said, the mayor is nonpartisan. That's why you don't see, for any of the council members, you don't see what their party designation is. That being said, it's like you can usually figure out that from what their list of endorsers are. So I didn't get the county Democratic endorsement, but I got multiple Democratic clubs, and so the Silicon Valley Asian Pacific Americans Democratic Club and Sunnyvale Dems, and so you can take a look at my endorsements on my webpage. But endorsements are, I think, especially from the organizations or worth something. I think personal endorsements from Sunnyvale residents is really important. It's from our past council members. It's from our leaders, and I think that's from our commissioners. I think that's really important too. And then as far as the elections are concerned, people are worried about the delays. So, for one thing, if you want to find out any information about voting, about, getting a replacement ballot, if you didn't get your ballot or tracking your ballot, you can go to sccvote.org, and that will give you all the information for the county registrar. And I've talked about this before from a Voters' Choice Act standpoint. Everybody that's registered will be receiving a ballot in the mail. If you didn't receive your ballot, you can always get a replacement one. You can vote anywhere in the county, and there will be 22 voting centers that will be open 11 days before Election Day, which so in about another week they'll be open, and then there will be 100 plus voting centers open 4 days before Election Day, which is on Halloween. And so some of those voting centers, and those voting centers are basically like going down to the county registrar's office right now, and they can give you a replacement ballot, they can give you provisionary ballot, they can, whatever your needs are, they can register you to vote. If you or someone would be qualified to vote but hasn't registered to vote, you can actually do that at a voting center. And so we won't have any that will be open 11 days before Election Day, but we will have some voting centers that will be open 4 days before Election Day. And that's on October 31st. But the voting centers that will be in Sunnyvale are at Washington Park, Braley Park, the community center, the school, the Sunnyvale Middle School Library, Fair Oaks Park, Columbia Middle Library, and Cupertino Middle School Library. And so, those are places that are basically fully staffed to deal with all your voting needs. You can drop off your ballot to make sure that, somebody's actually, taking it and immediately putting it, immediately making sure that it's there. There's multiple ballot drop-off locations within the city. And, I've heard some people worried about, is that safe? Definitely, that's very safe. Those ballot boxes, and we've heard of, let's say, illegal ballot boxes that have been put up somewhere in the state, but there are several county-provided ballot boxes that have been set up within our city. One is at the library. One is at City Hall Annex. So if you paid your water bill, it's right outside the City Hall Annex. One's at the Valley Medical Hospital on Fair Oaks. One's at the Sunnyvale Community Center, so right outside the Sunnyvale Community Center, and one's at the Sunnyvale Presbyterian Church on Fremont Avenue. And so those 5 different locations are places where you can go drop off your ballot. It's very safe. If you're worried about the mail, some people are, you can drop it off directly, and someone comes by 3 times a week to empty out those boxes and make sure that they go directly from that ballot box to the county registrar to be counted. So from that standpoint, there are safe locations to drop off now. You can always go to the county registrar's office in San Jose, but voting by mail is safe. It's just it has to go through the post office. So that's always a question that I would get. But drop off is safe. The voting centers and having those voting centers will be open on Halloween, so in just about 2 weeks, is important. And then if you are mailing your ballot, you just need to make sure that it's mailed by or on November 3rd, and the county register is allowing up to 17 days for those mailed ballots to actually end up at the county registrar's office to be counted in this year's election. So that's important from that standpoint. Making sure that you do need to vote. It's your civic duty. Get out there and vote if you can. There's a question: is Sunnyvale safe? And I've been getting more questions from residents who don't feel safe, or that their kids don't feel safe. Our public safety is actually reaching out to several neighborhoods where there were several events in the last few weeks of either somebody being robbed in daylight. Most of these are people coming from outside of our community in. Uh, we have these incidents, you know, off and on for the last, every year, and so it's making sure that that you are aware of the people around you, but it's also public safety, doing the appropriate investigations, tracking down the perpetrators. Um, Crime is actually down since since this time last year. So from January through September, um, comparing 2020 to 2019, uh, property crimes are down 12%, and violent crimes are down 15%. And so, you know, there has been, I'd say more crimes publicized, but definitely, we're doing what we can to track down the perpetrators, to make sure that our communities are as safe as possible. And DPS is actually, they'll be having, outreach meetings into those communities to hear concerns from the neighbors. I've already heard of more communities they're looking at starting neighborhood watch programs, and I think that's important. I've helped several communities over the years kick off neighborhood watch programs. That's important, that in making sure that you feel safe in your neighborhood, that you're aware, and that you're looking out for your neighbors is critical. Um, it's after 10 o'clock already. Okay, well, let's go ahead and wrap up. I think we've got to the majority of the questions. Uh, yep, let's go ahead and might as well. It's after 10. So, thanks for joining me again this week. I really, I hope you get as much enjoyment as I do about getting is about from this, because, you know, people continue to say that they really appreciate that, and those thanks, sometimes it's like, I am standing in a room talking to a camera, but it's actually it makes me feel good when I hear that people appreciate them, that as always, I'm proud of Sunnyvale's response to the pandemic, and I think that these events are a good way to build community, if nothing else, than hearing from your mayor, and getting your questions answered at the end of the day. I know it continues to be difficult. New issues continue to come up every week, but your response makes a difference. Helping your neighbors, making and share masks, mowing your neighbors' lawns, sharing baked goods or fruit you picked, writing positive chalk messages, or putting positive messages in your window. All those are positive for our community. It's putting out, building community, and especially during these difficult times. It's important to do your part, and that's what I feel that as mayor, this is what I need to be doing. I'm proud that of Sunnyvale residents pulling together to help neighbors, to help strangers. If you're out on a walk, wave, say hello from a safe distance. People continue to miss that social interaction. I saw that at the coffee shop, that yeah, I wasn't sitting down with residents, but people were happy to see the mayor there, to just come by and wave and say hello for a minute, and I think that was important. It's Sunnyvale will emerge from this as a stronger community. We're in this together. We will get through this together. Thanks for listening. Until next week, of course, stay safe, wear your mask, have a good weekend, and if you get a chance, go get tested. Okay, take care. Until next week, goodbye. Have fun.